Hey guys, I'm Azra, and in this Lord of the Rings Rise to War video, I'm going to show you a guide about Faramir, one of the strongest T1 commanders for good side. Now let's get going. Faramir is from his typing a balanced commander, which is okay because it's giving him overall good stats and he can work with that. The only typing which I think would be better for him is Warrior, but right after Warrior I am okay with a balanced commander. And there is a reason to it, but we will come to that reason later in the itemization part with the accessories. There is one accessory that is really working nice with this balanced typing. Anyway, Warrior is still the better choice, and the reason why is simply because Faramir has a lot of active skills. And now let me show you a little visualization. Here you see how many active skills he has going in on the specific rounds, like on round 1 you have Ranges of Aphelion and Rush being active because both of those skills have Rush built into it. And look at this, over 17 abilities for Faramir. So he is a glass cannon that is dealing steady physical damage. All of these abilities deal physical damage. 17 attacks. Imagine if you had the Warrior typing, that would mean you get like plus 10% increased physical damage. And I mean, if you look at this, like 17 skills and all of them deal physical damage, that would have been a 10% you could have felt. But instead he has to make do with the balance typing. Anyway, let's jump back to Faramir's overall stats and continue with the attributes. So his highest stat is his focus stat, which I think is kinda a waste because there is only one ability he has that scales with focus, being Armed Escort. It is dealing damage towards an enemy unit and also heals one of your allied units. But that is just not enough. I mean, if he had White Council, which scales with focus, or Magical Barrier that scales with focus, it would have made sense. But I just don't see why they would give him high focus as his main stat. So just keep in mind, don't concentrate on his focus stat. This isn't what you want to push. His main stat is actually Might. The more might, the more damage you're going to deal, not just your Faramir, but also your army. And this is what's great about Faramir. He can deal damage by himself, but he can also enable his ranged units to deal even more damage. Like, both parties contribute to dealing damage, Faramir and his army. But let's continue with his speed stat. So here you see he has, at level 50, quite a lot of speed. This is enough to outspeed anything important, so he has no speed problems because of that. But my advice to you guys, focus on his might stat. Try to push this as high as possible. And checking out his gear, as his weapon I have decided to go with the Mirkwood bow and ranged might. The reason for that is simple. I have 3 ranged units in his army, and also I am playing in Arnor. Arnor has access to Rangers of the North, being very strong ranged units, so I just had to go with ranged might. And then I also have unlocked his Respect 10 item, and by the way guys, I think Faramir really starts to shine once you get his Respect 10 item. It is quite unique, very good, and this is the only condition where I would say, hey, if you can provide this item, play Faramir as one of your mains. But if you don't have this item, I wouldn't really recommend playing Faramir. Instead, Dwalin would be much better. But if you have the Respect 10 item, it's worth a try. And you will see why in the reports later. His cape is quite nice because of the special effect Aphelion Ambush. For the first 2 rounds, not just only your Faramir gets initiative, but also your allied ranged units. And on top of that, you get a certain percentage damage increase for both of these parties, Faramir and his allied ranged units. I have 4-star refined it, which is giving me around like 50% damage increase. If I were to max it one more time, I think we should have a total number of 60% damage increase. And this is huge. And as his helmet, I have decided to go with the Trapper's Hood. This is the more aggressive version of his helmets. There is one that is more defensive, but we will get to that in the itemization part. I am running Hysteria right now because I just want a bit of CC to have the element of chaos a bit on my side. And last but not least, the Wizard's Fireworks is my accessory because I think this is the best item for Faramir and Gandalf the Grey. The reason why is because of the +3 attack for his ranged units. And also, look at this, Hunter's Mark special effect is quite unique. For the first 3 rounds, all of your allied units and your commander gets a certain percentage chance to gain pursuit. It is very rare to have this effect which covers your units and your commander. And guess what? Faramir does exactly that. He does damage by himself and also his units. So he is getting the maximum value out of this item. So this is my gear. Now let's jump over to the build and see what's going on. This is what I call the meta build for Faramir. It is pretty straightforward. You have Rangers of Aphelion, which is giving you rush. That means on round 1, you attack with this ability. Like on round 1, whenever it's your turn, you attack. Keep in mind that rush doesn't mean that you gain initiative. That isn't the case. So once you attack on round 1, the cooldown for this skill starts. That means like round 2, it's still on cooldown. Round 3, it's still on cooldown. Round 4, it goes in. And then the next round, like on round 5, you give initiative to your allied units. This is how Rangers of Aphelion works. If you max it out, you also get plus 15 might, which is like overall very good skill, Rangers of Aphelion. To the top we have flanking. This is going to be activated every 3 rounds, starting with round 3. And it's going to attack one enemy target. It deals a certain percentage physical damage and prioritizes range units. Also a very good feature built into this damage dealing ability. And then we have the ability Rush. Now what this does is usually it would activate every other round and starting with round 2. But because this ability has Rush as a feature built into it, it's going to activate on round 1 and then the cooldown starts. Like it needs 1 round to charge. That means if it goes off on round 1, on round 2 it needs to recharge, on round 3 it goes in again. And then we have his Respect 3 title being Guide. This is a very bursty ability. All of his units get for the first 2 rounds a certain percentage damage increase with physical damage. If you max it out, it is like plus 45% increased damage. And on top of that, you gain stun immunity for your army. So this too is kinda nice against Evil Side and their Nazgul commanders. Nazgul Screech is stunning your units in the first round. With this, you directly counter it. And then we have Armed Escort. This is his only ability that scales with focus, but kinda in vain. I don't think it is worth to invest into the focus stat just to boost like the healing of this effect. I'm not quite happy with this. But it's going to activate every other round, starting with round 2. It's going to deal damage against 1 target while healing one of your allied units. And that's it. But just as I said before, I don't think that it is worth to invest into focus just to push this skill. It's not enough. At Respect 5 we have Air. Not one of the greatest abilities, but we have to pick it just to get access to Gallant or Nobility. Now, if you are running an army that isn't consisting of 3 man units, I think you should go with Gallant. But if you have 3 man units, ideally ranged units, I think it's much more worth it to go with Nobility. And there you go. This is Faramir's meta build. Let's also quickly establish what strengths and weaknesses Faramir has. Let's start with his strengths. So his number 1 strength is, if you ask me, it's definitely his burst damage. He has burst damage because of his Respect 10 item. Without that, this Faramir build wouldn't work. Like, the Respect 10 item is the only thing that is redeeming Faramir and making him competitive. So burst damage because of his Respect 10 item, but also because in the first 4 rounds he is doing so much. Like, he has so many skills that are going to activate, and also with Rush being activated on round 1. Rangers of Aphelion, and also the skill called Rush. His second strength would be Initiative. This is an easy one. Initiative is always nice to have. Faramir gains Initiative as well as his ranged units. Just make sure to always have 2 ranged units in your army comp and you should be good. His third strength is also pretty straightforward. He could potentially provide Pursuit. Like right now I didn't skill into it because I have accessories to take care of that. But if you don't have that item, you can technically just go into Foresight, and there you go, you have taken care of Army Pursuit. Well, it is a pity that it isn't covering Pursuit for Faramir himself, but it's still better than having no Pursuit at all. But the best option to gain Pursuit for Faramir is still the Wizard's Firework with Hunter's Mark. It's giving Faramir and his allied units Pursuit. Foresight is just a fallback plan if you have no Pursuit at all. His third strength is, well, once you max out Guide, you gain stun immunity for the first 2 rounds, and I think this is kinda nice. If you think about fighting Evil Side, you are always taking care of Nazgul Screech stun, the very first round stun, and if you're fighting against Good Side, guess what? Gandalf the Grey or Gandalf the White, who open with a first round stun as well, you counter them with this as well. And his last strength would be, if you ask me, he is kinda low with his upkeep costs. Very cheap army, you can run it all day long. Like ranged units are in many cases infantry units. They are easy to conscript and also fast to conscript. Now let's also summarize his weaknesses. His first weakness would be, since he is so good in providing burst damage, that could also be his weakness, burst damage mitigation. Like, let me name you a few mechanics. Harbinger of Darkness, Mouth of Sauron is running it. Or how about Isildur's Last Alliance? Or how about Mithrandir and White Council? All of those skills aim towards countering burst damage, and Faramir is going to feel it. His second weakness would be a few crowd controlling effects. Let me summarize. First, it is Army Madness and also Commander Madness. Why am I saying this? Well, Army Madness is because of Guide and his Respect 10 item. So you have lots of burst damage. If that burst damage is redirected towards your own army, they are going to nuke themselves. And this is a no-go. You have to somehow protect your units with Resolve or Aegis. And then you are also weak against Commander Madness because of all of these active skills. Do you remember this skill activation overview I showed you at the beginning of this video? This is also why I say that he is weak against Commander Madness. Like, let's say he's fighting against Sauron or against Isildur. They could potentially make him fall victim to madness in the first 2 rounds. That would mean that Rangers of Ithilien, Rush, and Armed Escort would be redirected towards your own army. And guess what? This is early round damage, and this game thrives of early round damage. Having that redirected to you is just a no-go. You can't take it. So now you know that you have to take care of army and commander madness. Like, it's really coming down to what the enemy is throwing against you. You can't cover everything, but when you use clairvoyance, you can be as prepared as possible. His next crowd controlling weakness would be stun. Not just only his army, but also Faramir himself is vulnerable against it. You have seen how many active skills Faramir has. Whenever he falls victim to stun, well, you can't use your abilities. That would be a waste of potential damage. And the other stun weakness is his army stun weakness. He may have a cover to like bypass stuns in the first 2 rounds, but what do you do after? Imagine if you are fighting against Gandalf the Grey. Gandalf the Grey has Blindside. That is a stun being activated every 3 rounds. And that is a huge counter against Faramir's ranged army damage. Guess what? Guide is only active for the 2 rounds. Blindside is directly activated on round 3. Like immediately after Guide's special effect wears off. Last but not least, I think his biggest weakness is also elemental damage, especially when it is combined with Convener. So I'm talking about Alchemist. The Witch King or Gandalf the Grey with Alchemist, if you are playing on a non-RP server, that is a big threat against Faramir. None of his abilities provide elemental damage mitigation, and that is something you have to be careful of. Like, you can't just carelessly send your Faramir into a Witch King. Let's jump over to the itemization part and see what works best for Faramir. Alright, so here we are at the purple gear part. All of these items, just as always, are just my recommendation, what I believe to be best in slot for him. So let's get started. The Mirkwood Bow, in my opinion, is the best item for him in his ranged army composition because of the overall good stats, but especially because of the +3 attack for his ranged units. That's just so good. And then as a special effect, Pierce is universally good. You can always go with Pierce, but if you are running a 3 ranged unit army, I think ranged might is also very solid, maybe even better. As a chest piece, well, this video is all about his respect 10 items, so this is our only option. If you don't have this, you aren't competitive enough with Faramir, so Ranger's Cape is definitely your best in slot choice over here. Like, look at the stats. All the stats are useful. Also some defense for your man units. Why not? It doesn't hurt. But the main reason why we have this item is because of the special effect Aphelion Ambush. Lots of burst damage and also initiative for Faramir and his ranged units. Definitely one of the best spec 10 items in the game. As a headpiece, you have the Trapper's Hood. Like, this is your offensive option with the +3 attack for your ranged units, and Hysteria. If you're running a 3 ranged army comp, you can also go with ranged Vigor. That is also cool. But I think Hysteria is adding a bit of chaos into the battle. I like going with Hysteria. Then you also have a defensive option, being the Horseman's Helm, because of Resolve. This is the only reason why we want this helmet. If you are fighting a lot of, let's say, Grimars, Mouth of Saurons, and also Sauron himself, go with Resolve. This will help you a lot. And then as our accessory, I think the Wizard's Fireworks is the best. We already talked about it at the start of this video. +3 attack is just so huge. But mainly, we want this because of Hunter's Mark. The unique ability, like the unique pursuit effect, being active for your commander as well as your army, is just priceless. You need it. But whenever you don't need to cover pursuit, you can always go with ranged might for some additional damage. Having a look at Faramir's golden weapons, this was a hard one because I'm not quite sure which one is truly the best in slot item for him. But I feel like the Gigantic Hammer is doing a solid job because of lots of might and the +6 attack. He has many infantry ranged units that will benefit by that a lot. But if you want to deal damage with your Faramir himself, like mainly focus more on his damage output, maybe the Axe of Khazad-dûm and Cleave is the go-to. And as a third option, well, if you don't have an Axe of Khazad-dûm and Gigantic Hammer, you can still make do with Dawn. I don't believe this to be as good as these two weapons to the top, but this is also something you can work around with, because it has Strip Armor and also Bane of Soldiers. It's okay, not the best, but we have to make do with what we have, right? And then, looking at his headpieces, I think this one is pretty straightforward. Hunter's Guide is definitely his best in slot helmet. The plus attack for his ranged units is priceless, but above all, it has Aegis. This is covering one of your main weaknesses, being madness for your army, and also stun. Like, definitely best in slot. If you don't have this, you can still make do with Discord. If you don't have a Hunter's Guide at all, you can go with the Cask of Submerged Isle, because this too has Aegis. But if you don't have Aegis, you can still make do with Formation Break or Last Resort. Like, I think both are legit. You have already seen the skill activation overview. He is dealing damage on a regular basis. Now, do you want to front load your damage? Go with Formation Break. I have listed Last Resort just as a third option if you don't have Aegis and Formation Break. And now, here we are at the accessories. And remember when I said at the start of this video that I prefer his typing to be Warrior? And the only reason why I am accepting Faramir as a balanced commander is because of one certain accessory. The very reason why is because of this item, Box of Knowledge. Not just only has it like overall good stats and also +3 HP, but this is good because of him being a balanced commander, because now he has access to this special effect. On each round, when you max refine it, you have a 60% chance for triggering 2 effects. The first one is removing a random debuff. This could be very huge. There are some game-changing debuffs in this game, such as Disheartened, Harbinger of Darkness from Mouth of Sauron, or let's say Chaotic Retreat. They are hurting your army a lot, and with this item, you can just get rid of those big debuffs. Yes, there is a little luck factor built into it, but still, when it procs, you're going to feel it big times. And additionally, you also have a 60% chance to proc damage dealt plus a certain percentage for 1 round. So you have 2 procs built into this special effect. And I must say, this is, if you ask me, one of his best accessories. Now, if you don't have the box for balanced commanders, you can still make do with a Night Star and Opportune Strike, or how about Tactical Mark or Reinforcement, which can go kinda nice in Tactics Evolved with certain combinations. Like some units have the special effect Haven, and if you are playing Arnor, let's say with Rangers of the North, with rare reinforcement, you can proc Haven. And Haven is mitigating damage by 15% and 30% whenever your ranged unit gets a healing. So in Tactics Evolve, I see some value with rare reinforcement. And then we also have the Belt of the Citadel, also very viable. There is overall good stats on it. And you have a special effect called Arnor Defense to boost the defensive stats of your man units by a lot. And in return, you just have to sacrifice a bit of speed for your man units, but I think the value you get out of this is still much better. It is a lot of defense, and it has also Might of Man as a second special effect to switch back between those two special effects. And last but not least, you have the Palantir of Orphanc, +3 attack is always nice to have, and then Tactical Mark to give your units Pursuit. Not quite ideal. I believe that if it comes to Pursuit, the Wizard's Firework is still the #1 choice for Faramir because of the very reason he himself has lots of active skills, and it would be a waste if you don't give him Pursuit as well. Let's also check out Faramir's troop composition and see what makes sense. I'm going to suggest you 2 possible formulas to mix his army. The first formula is like this. You will have 1 tanky unit in your front line. That could be Guards of the Tower or Guardians, or if you are playing Gondor, well, then just use Sworn Knights. That is very good for Faramir. And as my ranged units, I would always try to have 2 infantry ranged units in my army because you get 100 units per 1 command, which is scaling the best for your damage. And ideally, I would try to prioritize having Sentinels and also Sharpshooters in my army. Not Bow Knights. Bow Knights have like 50 units per command, and that's not so beneficial for your plus attack. So this is a very highly accessible army composition. You can always go with this. It doesn't matter in which faction you are. And then, if you want to squeeze a bit more damage out of this, like let's say you are playing Arnor, I could now just replace my Sentinels with my Rangers of the North, and this would be a much better comp. Or how about I have like Spirits of the Wood? In that case, I would replace my Sharpshooters and go with this composition. This is even better. Yes, they are like having only 50 units per 1 command, but these units deal focus damage, direct damage to the HP of the units. That's why I have included them. But they are very weak. You need to protect them, which is okay. We have Rangers of the North. These guys are going to protect them anyway with Protector of the North. And you see, you have various ways of combining your units. Let's assume you have access to Vosis Hunters. In Tactics Evolve, Vosis Hunters have a special effect called, I'm not quite sure what the name was, but it is basically follow-up. You have a chance to attack twice per round. I think it was a 50% chance to follow up. If that was the case, you could also replace your, if you don't have access to Spirits of the Wood, just put them out and assume that I am putting Vosis Hunters right into my army. And that could also work very well. Or let's say you want to play Faramir with a 3 ranged army composition, which is also very nice. Let me show you what I am running right now. Since I'm playing Arnor, I'm doing this. I have always Rangers of the North and then also some Sharpshooters. And then I just do this, have an equal amount of these units. And this is a very strong army composition in Tactics Evolved. I have focus damage, I have protection for my ranged units with my tanky ranged unit Rangers of the North. And I also could further increase the damage output of this if I had access to Vosis Hunters with their follow-up in Tactics Evolved. But unfortunately, I don't have them yet. But I think if I had them, I would just replace my Sharpshooters, and I assume that this would be the strongest ranged army composition for Faramir. If you don't have those units, then you can still do this. Like, you can still play with Sentinels, and also with Bow Knights. This is something everybody has access to. If you are playing with Lothlorien, of course you can always include your March Wardens, just replace your Bow Knights with March Wardens. Or let's say you are playing Lindon, then use your Noldor Longshots instead of Bow Knights, and so on. Like, I think you get the gist of it. But if you still need some guidance how to build your army in more detail, just join my Discord channel. You can find the link on my YouTube banner to the top right corner. Click on that Discord symbol and then you just get automatically forwarded to my Discord channel. And there you will find various easy to digest commander guides for you. It is for free, why not use it? It's time to have a look at the battle reports, and right off the bat, let me thank this player. Postban, I hope I pronounced your name right. If not, my apologies, but it was very hard to find a Grima. He volunteered for this fight, and I wanted to find out what's going on over here. Let's check out the gear. You see, nothing has changed. This is what I recommended at the start of the guide. Hysteria and Wizard Firework of Hunter's Mark. This is the build at the start. And here we go. I have Sentinels with Dispersion. I have Sharpshooters with Dispersion as well. I have Rangers of the North with Light Armor. These guys are tanking, so they are probably going to die for my other 2 weak backliners. And then Grimar has this gear. He is running with a Cutlass and Melee Might, Hauberk with Melee Vigor, Bone Mask with Manipulate, Smoking Pipe with Sustain. So a pretty much standard meta build for Grimar. If we check out his units, he has Halberdiers with Eradicate, then Dragoons with Rupture, and let me guess, it is of course always follow-up. That is just pure meta. So this is a top-notch Grima player, the best of the best. He has Prudence, and this is something I needed to cover. I have taken care of Grimar's Prudence by equipping the Wizard's Firework and the Hunter's Mark, but this was the best we could do. This is kind of disappointing, isn't it? Like, I expected so much more, but maybe we ended up nuking ourselves, because this is what Grima does. He is providing Army Madness every 3 rounds. And remember, this is one of his main weaknesses. We have nothing to cover us right now. If I had Resolve or Aegis, I could have prevented the first Army Madness from happening. But that wasn't the case, which is why we most likely ended up nuking ourselves a bit. And then let's check out the snapshot page. We have done 250k-ish damage. We have done around 250k-ish damage versus 225k damage. And here we see that our Rangers of the North were killed, which is why the damage number is so low. But this is just always going to happen. We need to protect our backlines, and also Faramir did a bit of damage by himself. Not as quite much, but still it is adding up. Next fight is up against Khaldun. Let's check out the gear. So I have a Horseman's Helm with Resolve. I was assuming that I would hit the same Grima player again, but that wasn't the case. And having Resolve against the Khaldun is a waste, like we don't really need this. Instead, Trapper's Hood with Hysteria would have been much better. Nightstar with Tactical Mark, like this too isn't really needed against Khaldun. He has no evading mechanics. Instead, Wizard's Firework and Ranged Might would have been the better choice. And my units in this case are the Spirit of the Wood, lots of focus damage. This is going to help us a lot because Khaldun is mitigating lots of physical damage, and focus damage is just bypassing that mechanic. Rangers of the North, again, light armor, and sharpshooters, of course, with Dispersion. Khaldun has this gear. He has Easterling Spear with Pierce, Hauberk with Melee Vigor, Horseman's Helm with Resolve, and Fireworks with Hunter's Mark. So it is a pretty standard Khaldun. And let's check out what his units have. Halberdiers with, oh, it's not Eradicate, it's Divide and Conquer. That is interesting. Dragoons with Perseverance, and then Champions with Rise Up. And in the snapshot page, we have done around 190k damage versus 230k damage. So we have kind of lost this fight, but I already summarized what we could have done better to increase the outcome of this report. Now let's see in the details what has happened here. T4 units, all dead. All of our sharpshooters almost dead, and our Spirits of the Wood were the only ones still standing. I must admit this is a bit disappointing. I would have liked to see how this report would have looked like if we had equipped the items I suggested. And I'm only mentioning the items I have access to. I'm not mentioning the best in slot items for him. In this report we are fighting a Mouth of Sauron. Let's see what has changed. Do we have the Horseman's Helmet? Of course we don't have it. Unfortunately I didn't equip it, but in this fight it would have been useful. Mouth of Sauron will inflict us with madness on round 3, and this is something I could have prevented. But anyway, it wasn't that bad. We still kinda won this trade-off. But on the other side, like, Mouth of Sauron is 7 levels below us. So that could be also a big reason why this report looks like this. Anyway, let's check out his gear. He has a broadsword with Orc Strength, then Goblin Armor with Orc's Vigor, Bone Mask with Hysteria, Wizard's Fireworks with Mend. And then I see he has Harbinger of Darkness maxed out. Alright, this is important. But if this Mouth of Sauron had the Ancient Numenorian Helmet with Tranquility, you could have removed this debuff from himself while having applied it on me. And that could have been a big game changer for him. Master of Mischief. Yeah, I can prevent this with Resolve. On round 3 it's going in. And Feeble is just increasing the damage. I can't complain about this, you know? He just needs a bit more better gear and then he will become more deadly. In the snapshot page, we see that we have done around 255k damage versus 245k damage. And in the detailed view, again, our Rangers of the North are always getting decimated. So you always have to keep conscripting them. But our main damage is coming from Faramir and our Spirits of the Wood. And in this case, we also have Dunedains, as I see. Yeah, that worked in our favor. Look at this. We just directly countered the Morgul Arbalest with those Dunedains here. And they have Traveling Light as a special effect. And Mouth of Sauron's units, they have Heartseeker, and then his Crushers have Solid Metal. So they do lack upgrades. Alright, that can change the outcome too. And Dispersion. So this wasn't really a fair fight. There were many things that could have been improved. Here we are fighting a Lords. Let's check out my gear. Again, we have the Trapper Suit with Hysteria and Wizard's Firework with Hunter's Mark. If I had Ranged Might, it would have been better for this fight. Because Lords just doesn't have any evading mechanics. We have Spirits of the Wood again, with Natural Power, with Rangers of the North and Light Armor, and Dunedains with Traveling Light. Let's have a look at Lords. He has Black Bow with Might of Orcs, Scout's Mail with Deafness, Horseman's Helm with Mounted Vigor, Drums of Moria with Haste of Soldiers. Like maybe if he had a special effect that is dealing damage, like physical damage, such as Pierce, or let's say Cleave, I think that would have been better for Lords. I think it could have been a game changer for him. But skills-wise, this is pretty much the meta build for Lords. I hope that he watched the skill order of Lords. It is kind of important because you want to have like the Deepen Wounds hit first, so your next ability is your burstiest ability following up on this attack. I hope he considered it. His units have these special effects. Oh boy, snipers with no third special effect. Maybe this explains why we had this outcome. And then dragoons with Rupture and champions with Rupture as well. So this is the outcome. I wonder why he didn't pick Rise Up for his champions. Like, wouldn't that have been much better? 15% increased damage for his units and Lords? Because that would have been what I would have done. If you Lords main players in Tactics Evolved know better, let me know in the comments below. Here we are fighting against Black Serpent. Thank you again, Postban. Like, I rarely get to see Black Serpents nowadays. You are one of those few running around. So my Faramir has this gear. I can't complain against Black Serpent, this is okay. Wizard's Firework with Hunter's Mark. Yeah, maybe we could have changed to Ranged Might. That could have been better. And here we go with Sentinels and Dispersion. And the rest stays the same, nothing has changed. Let's have a look at Black Serpent. Gigantic Hammer with Rend. Scale Mail with Melee Vigor. Harad Cast with Fortitude of Evil Man. Drums of Moria and Bane of Dwarves. He is running Black Serpent in his Respect 3 build, his Evil Man build. That is kind of strong, like I must admit, maybe that's even stronger than his Mumakil build. Having follow-up for your Evil Man in Tactics Evolved, it looks just crazy. Like you could have Eradicate proc twice, you can have Dragoons proccing their Rupture twice, and also Champions having not just only their debuff proc twice, but also Rupture 2. So this is a strong Black Serpent, and this is what has happened. Let's check out the snapshot page. We have done around 190k damage versus 160k damage. So this is kind of okay if you ask me. Like, economically speaking, we suffer from the Rangers of the North loss, but he has 2 hard to conscript units, and I think he needs to recover more from this hit, at least economically. And in the detailed view, we see once more our Rangers of the North sacrifice themselves for the greater good. They made our sentinels and sharpshooters stay alive to deal enough damage. This is going to be my last report, and there is a few things going on here. Let's see. Faramir has Prepper's Hood with Hysteria and Wizard's Firework with Hunter's Mark. Again, I think Ranged Might would have been better just to optimize my gear for this encounter. And then I have Sharpshooters with Dispersion, Rangers of the North with Light Armor, Spirits of the Wood with Natural Power. I am fighting this Sunint. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but thank you for volunteering for this report. That was a big help. And let's see, he has Gigantic Hammer with Giant's Power, Ranger Shroud with Resistance, Horseman's Helm with Resolve, and Palantir of Orphaned with Tactical Mark. Also, meta build Sunint. Like, I can't complain about her. Very good gear, very good build, and his units have these special effects. Dispersion for the Morgul Arbalests, and Dragoons with Perseverance. Last but not least, Champions with Rise Up. Everything makes so much sense. Well, if he had known that he was fighting against Faramir, he maybe could have changed his Horseman's Helm with, let's say, if he has the Hunter's Guide for the +3 attack for his Morgul Arbalests, and also Discord, that could have hurt my Faramir big times. And this is the outcome, so what can I do to improve the outcome of this report? Maybe, like this is my last idea to improve this, is to replace my Sharpshooters with Dunedains, and then we could have another fight. But I was running out of time, I couldn't find the player again, and this is what we ended up with. So guys, now you got an idea how Faramir does in very competitive PvP environments. With his Respect Ton item, he is competitive enough to keep up. You can always change your items, your units, to be in a better position. I just wanted to put this out. He is one of the best T1 units, and you have seen why. And just as always, if you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a like and consider subscribing. I see you guys next time.